The NBA Cup break gives us a great opportunity. That to talk NBA draft. Is the tank worth it? Who's out there? What about Minnesota's pick? What about Cleveland's pick? We'll do it all with Locked On NBA Big Boards. Leif Thulin next on Locked On Jazz.
You are Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
How are you? I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. This is Locked On Jazz. It's your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, give you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. We are free and available on all podcasting apps and on YouTube. Thank you very much. And we have a new daily newsletter at lockedondaily.com for Locked On Jazz. It's awesome. Thursday edition today. Mike Schreier's kind of more detailed NBA breakdown. Katie Heindel writes Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on the kind of old basketball big picture stuff. Mike gets down and dirty with you. You got to love his little Zach Lowy if you kind of like that kind of stuff. So go to lockedondaily.com, subscribe to the Jazz newsletter for you. Today's show is brought to you in part by Game Time. Download the Game Time app today. Create an account. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Here's the plan. Leif Thulin of NBA Big Board is going to join us. He's a draft expert. He's a college geek. He's a Jazz fan. He fills in on this show all the time. Hopefully you know him. We're going to talk about Minnesota and Cleveland's pick because that exists still. Right now, Minnesota's sitting at 13 and Cleveland's sitting at 30. See if those have any value. We'll talk about the big names. The kid out of BYU, where does he rank? He's kind of all over boards. We'll talk about Dylan Harper. We'll talk about Ace Bailey. We'll talk about Cooper Flagg. And we'll do it all with our guy, Leif Thulin. Welcome, Leif. Let's start. Is the draft as good as everyone's saying?
I think it looks especially good in comparison to the previous year. So I think it's really good anyway.
Draft. Whoa. That is like telling me that I look good compared to Roseanne Barr. Thank you very much. You don't even know who Roseanne Barr is. No, I don't know who the equivalent is now. Like I sing a national anthem better than Carl Lewis. Super. We're tanking so that we can be worse than the worst draft in the history of the NBA. Give me something better than that.
Well, I think it's really good, and there's more top-level guys. Like Wembanyama was an anomaly. He's generational. I don't think Flagg's quite generational, but he's worth tanking for, as are Dylan Harper, Ace Bailey, and a guy that's not on here but I think is really great is Kasparas Jakucionis from Illinois, and then Yegor Demon from BYU, local guy, also could draw some top 5 buzz.
All right, wait a sec. The kid from you're showing us all over the place. The kid from Illinois had a big night tonight, I think. He's 8th, I think, on like the ESPN board, if I've got that correct. So we'll get there in a second. Let's start on the top. So I read somewhere, and I really was dying to do this show, that Cooper Flagg is Andrei Kirilenko. And I literally wanted to do a show because it would have clickbaited the hell out of everyone and got me all sorts of clicks. Are we really tanking for Andrei Kirilenko? Is Cooper Flagg Andrei Kirilenko?
He's got more offensive skill set. He runs the most isolation and most pick and roll of anyone on Duke on a team that is probably among the top 3 already in the country and has young players. But the position that they're the oldest at is the guard, and yet he's their pick and roll initiator, and he's one of their best rollers. So Cooper Flagg at 17 years old in games against the top 10 teams in the country is averaging 22 and 11. So I think the numbers bear out there that he's efficient in those games, and he's played the big games as an initiator and one of the best defenders. So there's the Kirilenko comp because they are of the same race, and they're both athletic and long white guys that play good defense, but offensively he's got a lot more to his tool set than AK, and I grew up idolizing AK, so it's hard for me to disparage him.
Okay, the thing on AK is that AK actually was great at the 4, and we signed Boozer, and he had to go to 3, and then he wasn't great anymore. AK in this era could be the 4 and probably be a lot better. AK couldn't really shoot, which is probably what prevented AK from being ever what he needed to be. So where do we fit on the shooting end of Cooper Flagg if AK is the comp?
I don't think Cooper Flagg's an innately gifted shooter, but I do think it's serviceable, and it's improved vastly in the last 2 years. His form has improved. It is a little bit of a high, awkward release to the right, and it's become a little more close to his body and looks better. the numbers that you can throw in can be scary if you look at some of the comparisons that through 8 games his numbers resemble. He's shooting 75% from the line, which is fine, but he's shooting just 24% from 3 right now. And I would argue some of those are not necessarily great shots. But you look at the players he's compared to in terms of first and second round draft picks, so drafted players that had under 53 true shooting percentage and 25% or under 3-point percentage. There are some standouts in here, such as Kawhi Leonard, Lance Stevenson, Herb Jones, guys like that. But he's the biggest, and he's the guy who has the ball the most in terms of his usage rate is vastly ahead of every other player that profiles as just an athletic defender type. And then there you have the success stories of Kawhi Leonard on here. So he's the one who, of these guys, I'm most worried about the innate shooting ability, but he does so much on the floor.
Now, he's 17. He turns in 10 days or 9 days, he turns 18. I mean, how much is this just that this kid's so young and he's doing this against 20 and 21 and that you just have to believe that he's going to be outstanding?
I'm so on board with that because he's 17 years old and went and played against and with NBA players and stood out as one of the better players on the floor against the Olympic team as the guys that were supposed to pace them. He outshined Trey Murphys of the world. So really good, coveted NBA players. And the guy who drew the most rave reviews was Cooper Flagg, not only because of his age and the hype, but that's who guarded the Kevin Durant's. That's who scored in that lineup. So I have faith that it's just the usage rate, the responsibility for someone who's 17 years old. And I think it's nitpicking because when you have that much cachet and your name draws that much buzz, you can't only sing praise. There has to be criticism when there is anything to criticize.
But he's not Victor, right? He's not a guaranteed MVP one day. He's not. Is he a top 5 player in the NBA ever?
I think he can be. I don't think he's Victor. Victor was can't miss, the best prospect since LeBron. So you get 20 years. Generational is an overused term now, in my opinion. And I think LeBron was generational. I think Victor's generational. Those are the only two that have been generational in my life.
Yeah, I might change the phrase to like historically game changing. Like LeBron is historic. Victor's going to be historic. Like, from a Jazz standpoint, I did the show yesterday and said, hey, okay, Keontae George and Walker Kessler are showing they're going to be pieces. But when I say a piece, they're just like a rotation piece. That's all you should expect out of 16 and 22 out of a draft. We've gotten caught up in this game that we thought they might be Donovan or they might be Rudy. Okay, that's unfair to them. But in this draft, we need to get a top 10 or top 20 player in the NBA. And next year, we need to go get a top 10 or 20 player in the NBA. And the year after that, we got to get a top 10 or top 20 player. And we can miss on one of them. But like that's really the reality is we got 3 years of this to go get these guys. So then Keontae's 27, Walker's 28, and they're coupled with these guys as they're 23 and 24 in their third and fourth years. And then we get to go. It's 29, 30, 20, 30, 31. But that's the reality. Is Cooper Flagg a top 10 most likely or a top 20 most likely player in the NBA?
I think he can be a top 10 guy. I think he profiles as a ball in hand version of all the good things you'll say about Chet Holmgren, all the intangibles, the great defense, all those things that you love about Chet Holmgren. You now put him ball in hand and someone who has more positional versatility in Cooper Flagg. So I think you're getting a top 10 guy in Cooper Flagg. And it just depends how quickly his offensive skill set catches up because he's rapidly improving. It's just that his jump in competition was, hey, I'm playing 15-year-olds. And then next year he plays seniors in high school. And now he's playing 21-year-olds. And the best games he's had in the entire season have been against top 10 opponents, averaging 22 and 11 and 4 assists. And everything that you ask of him, he's been able to do defensively as well.
And he's the top of the scouting report. All right, we'll start on this. We'll Ace Bailey or Dylan Harper. Why? Which next? Why? And then we'll dig into that player.
For right now, I would go Dylan Harper because he's shown he's more polished and more physically able to compete at the professional level. I know he's playing collegiate basketball, but he's not bothered by no matter how he's defended. He's the primary guy on the scouting report and their teammates. So that says something to me. He splits defenses when they hedge. He attacks switches. He punishes drop coverage. Every so often, you'll see a cold shooting night from him. But he's been able to score 25 points per game in just about every single game. He's averaging 25, and he's played against Alabama and Houston, two teams that have been at the top of polls, and scored 37 and 25 on two of the best defensive, most athletic teams in the country. And his passing numbers are good. As for shooting, that's what he was nitpicked for the most severely. But he's been 90th percentile in pick and roll. And that's what the most dangerous thing is in the NBA right now. If you can pick and roll, and if you can shoot off of the pick and roll, and particularly threes, that's unguardable. His dribble jump shot does warrant concern, 25% from the field on those. However, his catch and shoot, he's 8 of 19 from 3 on catch and shoots. So pick which ones you think is more important through 9 games. But the guy scoring 26 points is the top of the scouting report as an 18-year-old, and I believe it.
All right, we're going to discuss this some more. I don't know much about these guys. I just know fundamentally, like you choosing 6'5" over 6'10" is hard for me to swallow. And we'll touch on that in a second. Leif Thulin, Locked on NBA Big Board, Locked on Jazz with us. It's time now for us to get some business done, but we'll talk about why you possibly go 6'5" over 6'10" and who's fourth. Because that's really the likelihood of where you're ending up, even if you end up in the bottom 3. Who's fourth and how good are they? How deep does it go where you can get a top 10 or top 20 player in the NBA? We'll talk about all those things as we continue on Locked on Jazz. One of the great things about Locked on Jazz is Steve Carter over at Intercap Lending. I cannot tell you how great it is for me to be able to tell you about Steve Carter. It is even better when I get the email from someone that says, hey, can you connect me to Steve Carter? Because I know exactly what the customer service you're going to get from that is, and that is as good as it gets. Steve Carter and Intercap Lending continue to change the marketplace. They are basically the mortgage company that's shaking up things, making home loans accessible, straightforward, and personal. Whether you're buying your first home, refinancing, exploring options as a veteran, or exploring options as a veteran, Intercap is there to guide you. They're known for people first. Every client gets dedicated loan officer like our guy, Steve Carter. And they're not just a number. So you get Steve Carter, your own personal loan officer, because you're a Locked on Jazz every dayer. Be a part of it with Steve. If you need to reach out to Steve, give me an email at dlock09@gmail.com. Underwriting turn times are still at 24 hours, and most banks are 4 to 7 days. That is the difference when you're dealing with Intercap. Chris wrote to us, second time I've used Intercap, and I couldn't be happier. Steve and his team got me a competitive interest rate, closed my new home way quicker than anyone else ever tried. Steven himself was great to work with, giving me all the paperwork needed, middle of travel across the country. He was responsive, knowledgeable, even at 8 o'clock sometimes, and always present to speak with. Thanks, guys. That's from Chris. Email me at dlock09@gmail.com. That's dlock09@gmail.com so I can get you hooked up with Steve Carter to be your own personal loan officer at Intercap Lending. Today's show is also brought to you by Game Time. Game Time's got it all. All-in pricing, seat view, lowest price guaranteed, and Game Time ticket coverage. And now they've made it even better. They have Game Time picks for you, making it easier to find your favorite teams play like ever. Here's how it works. Game Time filters out all the fluff, shows you only the most incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets and do it with Game Time picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA. You get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Create an account. Redeem Locked On NBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Back with Leif Thulin. Reminder, Locked On newsletter available at lockedondaily.com. You can get it for free in your inbox every single day. Get it done. Thanks very much for tuning in today. Leif, all right, you made a pretty good argument, but just the way the league, and I get it, the kid's better in college, but the league is about size and length, and Ace Bailey's 6'10". Are you really comfortable going 6'5" and 6'6" and Dylan Harper over 6'10" Ace Bailey?
The answer is I'm not horribly confident in it, because before the year started, I was on the side of Ace Bailey. However, when watching them play, the comfort level is so vastly different between the two. Ace Bailey has really struggled to create any space against collegiate athletes, despite being 6'10". His isolation numbers are, he's 3 of 18 from the field in isolation. That's 19th percentile compared to collegiate players. So that part scares me, because what good is being 6'10" if you're just shooting catch and shoot? That's Michael Porter Jr., and you don't want to draft Michael Porter Jr. when you've got all these guys here. And I'm not taking that as a shot at Michael Porter Jr., but we're talking about franchise changers, and he's not that.
Though, let me ask a question on that. Michael Porter Jr. doesn't have back surgeries. Where does he go in that draft?
Oh, top 3.
So, right. So, not crazy, right? So, not crazy.
But I also think Ace Bailey, the idea of him is, hey, you can put this body of 6'10", and you have the skill set that you hope can be Paul George. Paul George is one of the best ball handlers in the NBA for his size. And Ace Bailey is extremely loose with the ball. He's feeble strength-wise compared to the players that are older than him. Whereas Dylan Harper's been able to move himself up and not be bothered, and his usage rate significantly higher. That said, I do have a counter in the pick and roll, though small sample size so far. He's 89th percentile in Ace Bailey. So maybe you just need to give him a screen and let him create for himself and others. The question is, do you really trust him to keep that up, or does the 19th percentile on 18 shots mean more than the 89th percentile on 8 occasions so far in terms of the pick and roll?
All right.
So I just think Ace Bailey's done more so far, and it's just been by such a vast difference in terms of the comfortability on the same team.
Do you think that either of these guys ever knock on Cooper Flagg's door as the number 1 pick?
I think Dylan Harper has a chance in the sense that he's scoring 25 per game, and he's close to the same age, and he's able to do it with the ball in his hands. And maybe some team can convince themselves, we want this guy to be ball in hand and be the pick and roll orchestrator. Maybe, but I'd say it's 95% likelihood it's Cooper Flagg.
Okay. Do you think that Ace Bailey gets talked to go above Dylan Harper at some point in time?
Oh, absolutely. I still think many evaluators would say he's higher because if he reaches his absolute ceiling, who knows what that may be? Does it look like Tracy McGrady? Well, Cooper Flagg's looks like Scottie Pippen in terms of just the highest outlying upsides. Like, I'm not projecting either of those guys to be Hall of Famers, but if they do reach their absolute ceilings, maybe his is higher because you'd rather build your franchise around Tracy McGrady than you would around Scottie Pippen, because Scottie Pippen was a great number 2, but when he was a number 1, yes, he was all NBA, and I did a research project. He had 2 all NBA seasons without Michael Jordan, but Tracy McGrady was the better player. Like, maybe, but Cooper Flagg's intangibles, I think, are just so much safer and more likely to reach that, because some of the debate is how attainable is ceiling, and I think his ceiling's harder to reach than even Dylan Harper's, and certainly harder to reach than Cooper Flagg's.
Is there anyone else that's going to get drafted in the top 3? Is there any chance these guys are not the top 3?
I think there's a world in which this guy named Trey Johnson, who's a 18-year-old guard for Texas, and Kasparas Jakucionis, who played for Barcelona last year, and he's now with Illinois, and he's had 4 consecutive 20-point games where he's the pick and roll savant. He plays like Luka Doncic of college basketball. I think there's a world in which either of those guys could supplant one of the Rutgers guys, but I would be pretty darn confident it's Flagg 1, and it's going to be Harper, Bailey, in some order too. There's a world in which a team likes a ball handler, and that's where the Jakucionis thing could move him up.
Okay, so despite the fact that we have the highest odds, thank you to our 0.7% with Minnesota for the number 1 pick, and we have the highest odds to stay in the top 4, I just hit Tankathon, and we came in 4th, which is what happens most of the time when you hit Tankathon, is that you end up 4th if you're the Utah Jazz right now. And so that gets us to those 2 kids. So dig a little deeper into the Texas kid, Trey Johnson, and who he is.
So Trey Johnson is a 5-star All-American, so no surprise, and it's not this, oh my goodness, wow, he came out of nowhere. He's just not as highly touted as the guys we've previously mentioned. Trey Johnson is a scorer, professional scorer. He's someone you can put the ball in his hands, but you don't expect him to run pick and roll to get others involved. It's for him to score. He's a guy that I wouldn't be surprised if he scores in the upper 20s as an NBA player, because he's able to score with absolutely no spacing at incredible efficiency. He's shooting over 50% from 3, and his team cannot shoot whatsoever. He's getting face guarded, hounded. No matter what happens, he's able to score efficiently to the point where it's alarming. Ace Bailey was supposed to be that. It's kind of bad shot taker, bad shot maker. Trey Johnson is that, but better with the ball, and so far more able to adeptly handle the defensive pressure he's faced at a young age. Kasparas Jakucionis is, if you want an NBA comp and towards future Hall of Famers, he is Luka Doncic light. He is someone who in the pick and roll is excellent, and then in isolation, he's 91st percentile, equating to 85% effective field goal percentage. That is absurd, and it puts a value on 3-pointers, which is what the NBA is putting a value on right now. And he's also 96th percentile on dribble jump shots, shooting 50% off the dribble from 3. So Kasparas Jakucionis has one of the most elite weapons. He's 6'6" and is a guy who gets you near triple doubles fairly frequently in the collegiate game. So if you want a ball handler, I'd lean towards him over a Yegor Demon. I don't think he's quite the athlete that Dylan Harper is, But, Luka's not a great athlete either. He's just able to play with savvy, create space, and have incredible shot-making capacity.
They have Wisconsin, Tennessee, and Missouri coming up this week. Do you learn anything out of him this week in those games?
Well, he played Wisconsin last night, and he eviscerated them.
Okay.
And Wisconsin actually switched their entire method. So this is where college basketball, being a geek, comes in handy. Wisconsin is known to play drop coverage. That is what they play. They play a hedge or a drop, and they switched it just to try to negate him, and he killed them. So I don't know if you learn anything, because Wisconsin's not super athletic, but they are regarded as one of the better defensive programs, and he killed them, and he led his team to a win, even though Wisconsin's probably overall the better team. And when they play Tennessee, you're going to see one of the best defensive teams in the country, number one overall. And that will tell you something to see how he handles physicality and NBA athleticism.
What's about this kid at Baylor? You haven't mentioned him.
I don't like VJ Edgecombe. He is not as big as I think people would list him at. I don't think he's 6'5", and he can't shoot.
I don't like can't shoot.
He can't shoot. He is a tremendous run and jump athlete, but you don't see it applied to the college basketball game. He's struggled thus far, not even in Big 12 play, and he is not quite the ball handler that you'd want him to be if he couldn't shoot, which I don't think he can shoot. So I have him outside my top 10.
I'm not. I am still a really big believer. I'm working on some of the data on this. That if you do not, there are thresholds that if you do not reach as a collegiate player shooting, you will not be an above average. You will not be. Jonathan Kuminga still can't shoot. Like, we keep trying to pretend that these guys can learn how to shoot in the NBA. It's not true. Like, Kawhi Leonard did it. But he actually, if you go back and look at Kawhi Leonard, he wasn't actually horrendous at San Diego State. He just wasn't very good. But, like, there's a threshold. If you're under it, Ron Holland, you're under it. Like, he can't shoot. Like, we'll see. It's going to, there's a few guys last year. Stephen Castle's trying to bust it because Stephen Castle was under it. But frankly, I'm not totally convinced of that. So who are the players that and we do this every year. We ignore, Amon Thompson's great. He cannot shoot. Asur Thompson's great. Cannot shoot. It's going to come back to bite them, in my opinion, at some point in time. Who are the players that we're ignoring about the fact that they can't shoot right now?
Well, I think I have to mention Cooper Flagg, but I think the development curve favors him more favorably than others. VJ Edgecombe, I would say, cannot shoot, and I don't think he's going to be picked as highly as Tankathon or any sites have him. I just think that watching him play, he doesn't score. Even shooting, he doesn't score very much. So if you look through a big board, most of the other guys are pretty good shooters. Harper, his numbers are iffy. Like I mentioned, 24% off the dribble, but he's 8 of 19 from catch and shoot threes, but he shoots 78% from the free throw line. And he's 6'6" guard who gets to the rim at will. So I'll give him a nod there. And then Nolan Traore, who is someone you'll see sometimes crack the top fives. He's a French guard. He's supposed to be the next Tony Parker of the French team. He's going to pair with Wembanyama. He's really struggling shooting the ball, and he's very strong hand dominant. So his stock is falling because of what you said. The success stories in the NBA recently, the Jared McCains, the Dalton Connects has been, hey, like McCain was small, but he could really shoot. Dalton Connect was old, but he can really shoot. Those guys get playing time. They'll be able to play more frequently. And I think the data that you're speaking of is becoming more and more true to how people are perceiving those type of players that are one-trick ponies, because he's a great driver and a great pick-and-roll guy. But if you go under on him, what punishment are you going to take? And I think that's the question for Nolan Traore, who's slipping, and VJ Edgecombe, who's not a point guard, and he's a undersized two guard who can't shoot. I think his stock will plummet.
All right, we'll go down south next and talk about the kid at BYU. Well, let's talk about the kid who's going to BYU, and we'll talk about what Minnesota and Cleveland's picks might give the Utah Jazz as we continue here on Locked On Jazz. Today's show is also brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is the official sportsbook of Locked On, and right now, if you get started on FanDuel, new customers get a $5 on $150. You bet $5, you get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place your live bets on the NFL, NBA, all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel.com, official sportsbook of Locked On the NFL. I sure hope our Locked On NBA guys who just openly told me Atlanta was going to beat New York and locked an NBA yesterday, Jackson Gatlin, David Ramil. I certainly hope they followed their hunch and they did exactly this with FanDuel.com. Today's show is also brought to you by Mint Mobile. Big wireless providers, what you see is never what you get. Somewhere between the store and your first month's bill, the price you thought you were paying magically skyrockets. With Mint Mobile, you'll never have to worry about gotchas ever again. When Mint Mobile says $15 a month, when you purchase a 3-month plan, they mean it. So say bye-bye to overpriced wireless plans, jaw-dropping monthly bills, and unexpected overages. Mint Mobile is here to rescue you from premium wireless plans starting up at $15 a month. All plans come with high-speed data, unlimited talk, and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Ditch overpriced wireless with Mint Mobile's deal and get 3 months of premium wireless for just $15. Get to the new customer offer, your next 3-month premium, get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15. Go to mintmobile.com/LockedOnNBA. That's mintmobile.com/LockedOnNBA. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/LockedOnNBA. Just $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speeds slower, above 40 G on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. Continue a little NBA draft talk with the NBA Cup stoppage of action. We'll play Phoenix on Friday. Tickets are available at UtahJazz.com. I'll preview that for you tomorrow. Probably the last LOJ as well. All right. Tell me about this kid at BYU that everyone fell in love with on his opening night. Seems to have cooled a tiny bit, but tell me about this kid.
Yegor Demin is a passing wizard at the collegiate ranks. He is someone who sees over the defense, whips live dribble passes, and that makes scouts salivate because you see size, passing, and can he shoot? That's the question for him. The numbers were encouraging, and like you said, he's cooled off as the competition has increased in level. He's played on the road at Providence, not a very friendly sight. They've struggled. BYU has lost those games. But what he is really good at is he's passing, and he's 6'9", like a true 6'8", 6'9", and he's able to pass over the defense, create advantages in the pick and roll. And now the question is, how well can he punish them with his own scoring? He was able to do so against Central Arkansas. He's able to do so against Queens, some of these inferior schools that they hosted at the Marriott Center. And once Big 12 play starts and there's these no middle defenses, the rugged defenses of the Big 12, I am very curious to see how well he's able to punish the defenses and not necessarily just create for players that, probably aren't NBA players. And yes, they have some shooters, but you need to see him do some of the damage as a scorer. And that's where I have my questions. How well can he create for others? I have no question that he's able to do that in the collegiate games. How well can he create for himself against better athletes as the Big 12 gets going, which is known for a defensive league? I have some questions there. And that's why I prefer Kasparas Jakucionis, because he is potent scoring the ball. Like I said, isolation, 91st percentile, 96th percentile off the dribble. Yegor Demin doesn't touch that despite being bigger and probably a better, twitchier athlete than Jakucionis.
All right. How about the kid they just signed? Is he all everything?
He's the real deal. I'll readily admit I have not watched as much of him as I have this year's class, but in what I have watched, he is long, he is strong, and he is a modern player. What I mean by that is he's willing and very happy to take the three. He's willing to do it off the dribble. He's willing to do it off the catch. I'd liken him body type to Andrew Wiggins. I remember I was in middle school and I was like, man, this guy's incredible. Like, he's a can't miss prospect. And everyone else thought so too. He went number 1 and he's never improved his shooting. And the game has changed to make shooting more and more important. And this guy has Wiggins' kind of length, twitch ability, big time dunker, but he shoots hezzy pull threes. And he's watched Kevin Durant, you can tell. And he was asked, hey, who do you emulate? And he's like, well, Kevin Durant's my guy, but he's one of one. So maybe Paul George. And you can see the influence of those type of guys in him. I've talked to a lot of people in the know, and they would say that he's a better prospect than Cooper Flagg. I hesitate to say it with certainty just because Cooper Flagg's playing at 17 years old against pros and against collegiate guys and dominating them when he played the big competition. Like I said, 22-11 as a 17-year-old is not something you see so frequently, whereas Dibatsa's 17 and he's doing it against high schoolers in the state of Utah.
All right. I just did Tankathon again. We dropped to 7th. That's terrifying. Minnesota's sitting around 14. They'll probably get better. Their defense is, I'm not sure though, honestly. Like, their late game stuff looks really bad. 14 to 18, do we get a rotation player? Like the myth that we're, like how deep does this draft go? Where does it fall off?
It's always difficult early in the season because a lot of people, you look at their shooting numbers and they plummet, and that's where their intrigue is. I think there are some players that have the tools to be good and largely premise based on shooting. This guy named Will Riley at Illinois is 17 years old right now, and he's shooting 49% from three. He's 6'8". He's from Canada. He's a guy who's in Tankathon right now, 14th. Liam McNeely from UConn is a freshman who played alongside Cooper Flagg at Montverde Academy, alongside Derek Queen, who's also seen in some lottery projections. And he's a 6'8" shooter who plays with a lot of intensity defensively and willingness to play defense. I'm not willing to say he's going to be a great NBA defender, but he certainly has the willingness and the size to do so. So I think it depends how the board falls ahead. But I think there are players with the size and shooting capacity to be here because there's just a depth of them that there have not been in the past 2 or 3 draft classes that I've covered.
It's always interesting. Drafts fall at some point. It's always actually my theory on drafts when you're not sure if your guys made it is go back and look at the draft and you can find the line. And if your guy's he hasn't made it yet and he's on the wrong side of the line, you're in trouble. Like that's always my way. Like I think if you go back and look at the Trey Burke draft, like the line's like 3 picks above him. And you're like, oh, now Kentavious Caldwell-Pope ended up like kind of making it, I think, the pick before him. But like you kind of look, there's a drop. Like, oh, shoot. Like there's, and that's always, I think, a way to look at a draft. You might look at the Dante Exum draft and be like, oh, Aaron Gordon was the last player on that draft. Like there are some other players, but Nick Stauskas was shortly thereafter. And you get, Marcus Smart was shortly thereafter. And so you can kind of see it. So it's interesting always to know where that line is. Superstardom is 10 up. There are not many drafts where superstardom happens other than a weird blip with any consistency after 6, 7, 8 on the draft.
I see role players in the 10 through 20 just because there are a lot of players with size and shooting. And we talked about the necessity to shoot. And if you have any sort of positional size with a semblance of shooting, that's where the rotational players are made. You don't see superstars that play off the ball and shoot. I've talked with James Barlow on Locked On NBA Big Board numerous times about how I think the 3-and-D is starting to become overrated because that means you're good on one side of the ball and you're hidden on the other. Often it's kind of a misnomer. It's a 3-and/or D. And you're watching some of these guys and maybe they are that, but those guys have been drafted and stick around for a little bit. I don't think they have the potential that some of the people say because of the misnomer of playing both ways, but you have size and shooting ability in this draft through about pick 15, I would say, based on the estimations thus far.
Well, we'll probably do this again in February, or Leif will just be doing shows in the middle of a week in February, filling in for me on Locked On Jazz, so you'll get some more draft talk. Leif, catch him on Locked On NBA Big Board with Raphael. Kristen Peck was on today. Really good show. Catch it. A lot of great insight. Former Yahoo NBA expert. Leif does a great job. James Barlow does a great job. Raphael's traveling all the world, covering it all. There's no daily draft coverage show that does more than Locked On NBA, so go grab it. Leif, thank you very much for the time. Appreciate it today.
Thank you. Always happy to join.
That is Leif Thulin. Thank you for taking with us. Subscribe if you've not done so already. Follow if you're on the hit the bell button on YouTube. It's all free. Locked On Daily for the newsletter. Follow me on X, Threads, Blue Sky, Instagram, TikTok at DLock09. Have a great one. We now send you the first ever 24/7 national NBA channel, Locked On NBA Today, or on audio. Check out Locked On NBA Daily. Have a good one. See you.